Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and just talk about the PS5, what we know so far. A lot of this information coming from a Eurogamer.net article, which make sure I'll have linked in the description somewhere. Now, with this whole next generation of gaming consoles coming out, there's a lot of rumors and there's a lot to talk about, especially with what we know so far. So just kind of going through things here, I wanted to talk about that, as well as kind of throwing my own opinion on things here and there as we go through it. So, start with the more technical aspects. So, the PS5 specs, starting from the top with the CPU, will have a AMD chip based on the 7nm Zen 2 architecture, which personally I'm pretty excited for. In my PC, I've got a Ryzen Zen Plus chip, the 2600X, which is a pretty good processor for, a lot of production stuff, rendering videos, converting video files, just general workspace kind of stuff, which is, it kind of excels at that. But you can also run games on that too. And I feel like it does a pretty good job at that. So seeing something akin to the 3000 series, possibly in the PS5, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the Xbox Series X as well, is pretty exciting to me. I know a lot of people may not be as jazzed as that as a lot of AMD fans, Team Red fans might be, but I feel like this CPU will hopefully go well with the gaming space. Now, as far as the GPU, it looks like this will also be an AMD GPU as well, running Navi, using the Navi architecture. I don't know much about AMD graphics cards, to be honest, but a lot of the RX cards have been coming out for PC, not too bad. A lot of it's mid-range as far as graphical fidelity goes, and this may be cause for concern because there's a lot of companies out there saying, "Oh, PS5, Xbox Series X, it's going to be the next whatever the fuck as far as graphics goes," and I'm not holding my breath. I love AMD, but they're not exactly the best when it comes to graphics cards in the GPU space. A lot of that's dominated by NVIDIA. I'm surprised NVIDIA's not having anything to do with this at all. I mean, it just feels like the best GPU to go for, but I feel like in order to make sure these consoles stay at a pretty reasonable price overall, we're gonna have to cut some corners here. But who knows? I could be proven wrong, and this is actually something that I'm looking forward to seeing in action, but that probably won't be for a long time, until at least this holiday season is when I believe both consoles are slated for release. The Eurogamer article goes on to talk about audio. Don't know much about the audio here, other than it says the PS5 will have 3D audio, and that it will be dramatically different to PS4 audio. So I have no idea what that means. A lot of the time when I'm gaming, I'm using a headset, which doesn't really take advantage of surround sound. So if you have a home theater setup, you could probably take advantage of like a 5.1 to possibly even 10.1 if you want to go that far. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for a lot of hardcore gamers that rely on headsets, but if you have a home theater, that's a plus for you. I feel like this next point is where a lot of people are going to be focused on, especially for those just on the outside looking in, not really thinking about the specs for gaming consoles all that much, as the storage space, or rather the kind of hard drive that's going to be in there. Apparently, with both consoles, we're going to have an SSD, which is really, really cool, because those loading times are going to be trimmed down significantly. And this is something that I've implemented in my own personal computer for gaming, and it's definitely helped load times. So OS boots up like that, games load in a lot faster. Also, that kind of depends on your connection, how your internet's set up, if you're Wi-Fi connected for multiplayer games. But if you're just sitting down with a single player game, those games could load in faster just so you can get into the game. There's less waiting time. As far as resolution, we're going to be looking at full 4K, I'm pretty sure, but there's also they're also saying that there's going to be up to 8K support. And this is cool for those that have those 8K displays, right? But a lot of people are still gaming at 1080p, both like TVs and just monitors in general. And it's just an easily accessible resolution to game at, myself included. I'm gaming on 1080p displays, and I have no real plans to go to 4K, at least not yet. Once 4K kind of stabilizes in pricing and it's more reasonable to get into that kind of thing with the high refresh rate, which may be a while, I will be staying at 1080p. And of course, the PS5 will come equipped with a Blu-ray player. However, we're going to be looking at 4K Blu-ray, reading 100 gigabyte optical discs. Again, this kind of goes back to what I said about the 1080p thing. That's kind of where home is for a lot of gamers, especially if you're on a budget. But for those that have it, cool feature to have. As far as features confirmed so far, PS5 will support backwards compatibility for PS4 games. There's rumors floating around that we'll get 1, 2, and 3, but right now it's not confirmed that we're going to get that kind of backwards compatibility. It would be nice to see that, but that would also take a lot of resources to implement something like that, which could up the cost of the console. If something like that were to be implemented, this is just me kind of spitballing here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a price tag of around $600 just because of the backwards compatibility. However, if we stick it at just PS4 backwards compatibility, we could probably expect a more reasonable price point, like $400, maybe even $450, or somewhere in that respect. Another thing that we know is that there are some titles that may be developed for the PS4 and the PS5 and be released simultaneously on both platforms. We don't know exactly what games are going to be treated like this. I'm willing to bet Sony exclusives of PS4 or PS5 exclusives. Let's just throw it out there, and let's say The Last of Us Part 2 came out around the time the PS5 came out. I would expect that game to be released on both the PS5 and the PS4 just to maximize the sales, because there's a lot of people that are going to have a similar mindset to myself that are not going to be early adopters of these new pieces of hardware, just because you know for a fact that there's going to be kinks that both Microsoft and Sony are going to have to work out on these consoles day one. While it would be cool to actually have a console like that on day one, I don't know if I want to shell out that much money to get a console that I won't be able to completely enjoy the day that I get it. Like, for example, I recently just bought a PS4, and yeah, sure, I didn't pay exactly full price for it, but I was able to enjoy it right off the bat. It got all the updates in there. It was stable. I was able to jump right into a game, no problem. However, this may not always translate for new hardware released. You'll see it all the time in PC space, right? You'll need day one BIOS updates for motherboards, or just updates for your fucking CPU, whatever. There's always something that's going to go wrong. So for those people that still have the PS4 and want to play those games on release, they still have that option. They don't have to force themselves to shell over $400, $500, $600 just to play the new The Last of Us, or whatever the Naughty Dog game, whatever Sony exclusive PlayStation game is going to be out at that time. So you could still kind of find a way to ease yourself into the next generation of gaming, or console gaming. PS5 won't be digital only, so that's a plus for those that like to, purchase the physical copies. Myself, I still like to purchase physical copies every now and again, but Nowadays, primarily, I'm mostly digital, especially on playing on PC. I don't even have a fucking like Blu-ray or CD-ROM drive on my PC, just because I know a lot of the games I'm going to be playing are all going to be off of Steam, and I'm just going to download those games through the Steam client. But there are going to be that portion of people that are going to want to have that physical media, and that's fine. And I feel like that's okay. You still have that option, and that's good to hear, especially for that part of the community. The next part is something I'm really looking forward to, is that game installations will be quote unquote more configurable. So the way that the Eurogamer article explains it is that you'll, depending on the developer, and if they implement this support to the game specifically, players will be able to delete single player campaigns and still be able to play multiplayer. So if, like, you saw this already with like Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2, you were able to download and play both parts of the game, single player and multiplayer. But if you were done with the single player, let's say, you could delete that, make room for other games, but still play that multiplayer component of the game, which is honestly a really good idea. I'm surprised that this wasn't already implemented into like the 360, PS3, PS4, Xbox One era, because we already saw that done on PC with very few titles. The only one that really comes to mind is Call of Duty. But if more developers were able to go ahead and implement something like this on the console level, that could be a very welcome that could be something that could really work well, especially when you have a lot of these games that have both single player and multiplayer components, but after a while you just want to do the one. You just want to play multiplayer with your friends, and that's fine. So I feel like just having that kind of configurability would work very, very well in both consoles' favors if they had that kind of feature implemented. But then again, this comes back to the developer. They got to make sure that they implement this into the game itself. So there's also talk about how game sizes should be smaller. Personally, I don't believe that, just because of how fucking huge these game files were this generation, both across consoles and the PC space. But we're going to have to wait and see how that works out. PS5 will have some form of cloud functionality. I don't know what that means. This might have something to do with PS Now. I'm not too sure. And as far as cloud gaming goes, or streaming your games, I'm not really completely on board with that yet. But if it works, it works. And that'll be something that I would like to see. But there's so many variables in it that I just don't see it being a viable option for gaming currently. It could be in the future, but not right now. There is also going to be PSVR support for the PS5. While I haven't really dove into VR myself, I am seeing a lot of content on the PSVR, or just VR in general, and there's definitely a space for it. I feel like it's growing in popularity and accessibility as the years go on. So I feel like Sony's smart to include something like this into the PS5, or continuing that support into the next generation. Because if it blows up, they already got it. They can just throw that game on there. You're done. And it looks like the PS5 home screen will be more dynamic. I don't know what that means exactly. But hopefully having the ability to kind of modify it to your liking will actually be kind of a welcome feature for PlayStation fans, because like I mentioned earlier, I did get a PS4 recently and I have all my recent games there, but there's just shit that you don't want on there anymore. Like, I don't want to have this PS Now thing thrown in my face all the fucking time, so I want to make sure I could take it out so it stops annoying me. Also, I want to move my library application closer to the front so I could access that easier without having to navigate all the way to the right. And I don't know, like, if you have a PlayStation 4, you know what I'm talking about. But having something a little bit more dynamic in that sense, to where I can modify how things look, where certain applications are going to show up on a daily basis, that's something I would like to see. And a lot of people are going nuts over the logo. Like, I don't give a shit about the logo. It's the PlayStation 4 logo with a 5 slapped on it. It's not a big deal. It's like, oh, there's no creativity there. It doesn't matter. It's a logo. It's just going to be a little thing that's on the box when you get the PlayStation. And it's going to be a little thing that's on the PlayStation when you look at it sometimes. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so this next thing is like things we don't really know about it yet. And this next thing is a little concerning because there's this console design that's been floating around the internet that is apparently a dev kit. And that's the first thing I thought of when I saw it. It's that V design. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But it looks weird to me because the ventilation just doesn't look like it works. Or I don't know how it works, so it doesn't make sense to me. And it looks blocky, and I just don't like the presentation of it, to be honest. I'm telling myself it's a dev kit, and I'm telling myself that's not going to be the final design, but we don't know that yet. Honestly, I'm not going to be surprised if that is the design, if they want to go ahead and keep in theme with the 5 thing, V Roman numeral 5, right? But I just don't really care much for it, to be honest. But we'll have to wait and see. The PS5 price. Don't know much about that yet. I'm willing to bet 400 to 500, that bracket, USD at the time of release. Just based on what we know so far. But I won't be surprised if it goes up higher. I just hope it doesn't. Coming back to something I mentioned before, PS1, 2, and 3 backwards compatibility is unlikely. If that is included, again, I feel like that's something that's going to shoot the price up. While it would be nice, I don't know if that's going to be... Like, I feel like it would be worth it if you were able to purchase and download those games again if you don't have those discs anymore. Like, myself, I don't know where my game collection is. I might have sold it. I don't fucking know. But if I had that ability to play those games again, like Siphon Filter, like the old school Siphon Filter, or One, or any of these other games on the PS1 that I want to play again, I would like to play those games on my PS5, but I would have to buy them again, right? So if I had something like that with that backwards compatibility, that might be worth it. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Would you want to see that kind of backwards compatibility if that meant $100, $200 price increase at the time of launch, or can you live without it? Because personally, I could live without it. The next part may be a little bit controversial. So there is this rumor floating around that the controller will have some kind of voice activation. While something like that could be interesting, and honestly something that I'll use once in a while when I remember it exists, there is this whole conversation about that type of technology invading privacy in your home, because you'll have these pieces of tech like the Alexa or Google Home that will have to remain listening. They have to be on in order to recognize that you're talking to it, right? So based on that, people are a little, I wouldn't say paranoid, but concerned that there are third parties listening to their conversations. And there's I believe some of that does have some kind of merit to it. What the fuck? Unable to launch game. Please verify your game data. I'm not trying to launch a game. Oh, it's Grand Theft Auto 5? You're telling me this now? I tried to launch the game like yesterday. It's been a whole fucking day since I tried to... Whatever. Getting away from the point here. Because of that concern about always listening technology, people may not want to invest into something like a PS5 that might have that kind of tech on it. I know there's a lot of people that don't even have an Alexa or a Google Home solely based on that fact. Personally, for me, not a big deal. The biggest thing you'll probably hear from me is me raging at Counter-Strike or some shit like that. But I know how people can feel unsafe because of that kind of tech. And I don't blame them. But that could potentially hurt the PS5 if that feature were to be implemented. While I wouldn't mind it, it may not be the best thing for them. And people can feel differently about it. That's fine. Let me know what you think about that whole feature. If you would use it, if you think it's a privacy concern, etc., down in the comments below. And then the final point that this article brings up is the PS4 library will update to the PS5 version of the game, or whether the current way of doing things will stay the same. To kind of elaborate on that, between the 360 and the Xbox One, for me personally, my friends and I played Grand Theft Auto 5 a lot. However, when we got Xbox Ones, we had to buy the game again. And then we were able to at least transfer our data over from one game to another for the online play, but we still had to shell out, $40 to $60 depending on when you bought the game, just to play another version of the game you already played before. Sure, it looked a little bit better, but I mean, is it really worth buying again? And I feel like this might be pretty cool if you have a digital copy of the game from PS4 to PS5. Let's say, for example, if Grand Theft Auto 5 released on the PS5, I could just upgrade to that version on the PS5 because I already own that game on my PSN account, right? It would make sense, but then there's also the question that there's not as much money in that. Sure, you're doing the customer a solid, and I personally think it'll be great for us. However, there's a lot of developers that could be losing out on some revenue that way. And I feel like ultimately this feature should be implemented just because it's pro-consumer, right? And there's so much anti-consumer practices already in the gaming space, and people will be vocal about it. And it's gonna blow up in their face. I feel like if this is not implemented, there's gonna be a lot of conversation around it. I do hope it does get implemented though, because really good move for the consumer in the long run. You have that good relationship. So that's kind of where we're at with the PS5, at least from what I've read on this article. This was dated 29th of January 2020. So this is a pretty up-to-date information from what I understand. And I'm actually going to be looking forward to how the PS5, the Xbox Series X, how those things play out when they release, because I feel like there's still a market for console gaming. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of people that are on the PC space, but not everybody's going to want to deal with the PC. Not everyone's going to want to deal with an OS, whether it be Windows, Linux, sometimes in some cases, iOS or macOS. You just want to plug in and play a game, right? Just plug in the power, plug in your HDMI, hell, maybe even display port, I don't fucking know, and just play a game or watch a movie. And it's as easy as that, right? And as a gamer, I just like games. So PS5, Xbox, Switch, PC, whatever. I just like video games. And I just want to see this industry succeed and grow for both the consumer and those that are making the games, developing the consoles. So let me know what you guys think about this whole thing in the comments below. Hopefully it didn't drone on for too long. I feel kind of sick. I don't know what that's about. But I hope you have a good day, and I'll catch you next time.